Welcome back, everybody, to the One Fear Per Year podcast, where we talk about how amazing life freaking is on the other side of our fears. And we encourage each other to walk through those fears that hold us back. And I have, oh my gosh, the most incredible guest today. Frankie, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this super important topic.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I appreciate the love and support and happy to be here. And, when I saw what you're talking about now, what your focus is, this one fear per year, that resonated really deeply with me. So I'm happy to jump into the conversation. I think we'll probably come out with some pretty good stuff here today.
Woo! I am excited to pick your brain, and I want to know what has been your relationship with fear over your lifetime? Like, how has fear impacted you personally?
Wow. Yeah. So fears played a massive role in my life. Understanding it, eventually inventorying it, and then figuring out how to harness it has been a big journey for me, especially the last 17 years. So I wasn't conscientious of it till about 17 years ago, what I was supposed to do with the fear. I think up until that, I just thought, okay, fear is this thing that drives you. You need it. It's going to drive you, and it's going to be the best change agent there is. And I did that for a while, and I was in my 20s, and I was afraid of two things, but one big one. I was afraid of financial insecurity, and I was afraid of people. And what I mean by people is that I wasn't like an introvert, but I was just afraid of what people thought about me and if I was going to be enough, or more importantly, if I was weird. I didn't want them to know that I was weird. So depending on what day it was, is neck and neck for a long time, those two fears. And to this day, I'm 43 now. That was so 17 years ago would have been 26, 27. And the thing that happened for me that kind of created that consciousness around fear was that I had to get sober from drugs and alcohol. And part of that process is you inventory your fear. Your fear and your anger are the big things, but fear is this thing. Like once I got better at like anger and I got better at like not making as many harms, fear was this thing that remained a constant in my life and still is. And it's what keeps me accountable to the journey. But one of the things about fear is that it's usually deep rooted in something, right? So as a kid, I had experiences where people thought that I was weird, and I wanted to be enough for those people. And so that's where a lot of my work around fear and then eventually love your weird came from. It's all born out of the relationship to fear, all of it, really. And so we can peel that onion back many, many layers. But the fear of financial insecurity drove me through my 20s and drove me into the ground. Because not only did I get sober in 2008, 17 years ago, but I also lost my whole business. My first business blew up. Partly that's because it was in the mortgage business, which is actually a pretty good business if you're just trying to solve one problem, which is make money. And you think that solving that one problem will solve all problems, which most people that are out of their 20s know that that's not the case. Even though at the time, it's like, I don't know what people are talking about. Money can't buy you happiness. It feels like it does,
Like, what?
I mean, it's making me happy. Obviously, until it was gone and it wasn't making me happy. So, not sure where you want to go with that, but like, the fear of financial insecurity was started uh, for a good cause. We never were financially stable growing up on my own because my parents made the decision when I was 5 to get into inner city mission work. So we were running homeless shelters and nonprofits. So they chose to have less, but it always was a strain, especially for a kid. So you put those two together, once I inventoried it, and like obviously, disclaimer, everything I talk about as it relates to fear today at 43 is after years and years and years of pain and failure and deep, deep emotional work to be able to talk about it the way that I'm talking about it today. So if you're listening or watching this and you're thinking, man, how is he that in touch with it? Like this is years and years and years of becoming in touch with this stuff. I just want to
Yes.
kind of throw that disclaimer out there.
Years of work, doing the
Yes.
work and the process and the
And
healing.
helping other people do the work. One
Yes.
of the things for me that was a huge game changer and ended up affecting my business world a lot unexpectedly, was helping about probably by now 300 or so guys find sobriety themselves and helping them work through their fears. I mean, I don't want to like downplay the role that has played in helping me understand a universal relationship to fear for humans.
Absolutely. And I think it's just remarkable too how you show up in the world, which is cool because as we walk through our own fears, like the ripple effects of that and
Mm,
how that
mhm.
impacts the world is really evident. And I know it's evident with you in your life. So that's just amazing. You talked about something really interesting about the deep that it's deep rooted in something.
Mhm.
And usually I've found in my own life, if I go back to my teenage years or my childhood,
That's right.
that's when a lot of those fears kind of start to appear because of events that happened to us in our childhood.
100%.
What would you say for somebody who knows that that's the case for them? There's things that happened in their past, maybe they haven't quite dealt with them yet, and they can
Mm.
tell that they're really those things are impacting how they show up every day. What's their first step? What do they do?
Wow. Okay. All right. So I've one of the things that I've had to, really look at is this idea of, fear of people. Because like this one comes up a lot and it affects relationships. And the way we relate to people is very, very important to our healing. Because the way we're designed as a species is that our only power is when we're together. So we don't have fangs, we don't have any kind of like way to protect ourselves except for the us being crowded together as a group. That was how the only way we could beat a lion is if there was 20 of us in one event. That's our superpower as humans. And so when you think about that, that's where like there's no healing to this stuff in a vacuum or isolation. So it doesn't matter how many books you read, how much you meditate, how much you pray, how much you know, none of that matters. So the first part is finding somebody that I can get honest with about it, that I can trust, that doesn't have skin in the game, which means it's not a friend, it's not a family member. Okay. Like for me, the constructs of like the 12-step organizations changed my life, especially because I came from this religious background that I abandoned and didn't want to really, I didn't believe in anymore. It is at the functionality part of it. So I found this other thing that was non-religious and it was a game changer for me, but it doesn't have to be a 12-step construct. But what was good about that construct was that we knew that we were going to get somebody that could help us walk through the initial process of what we call cleaning up the wreckage of the past, which is a lot of times is about just getting honest about where we're at. And it starts with, okay, I'm afraid of failure, or I'm afraid of never being enough, or I'm afraid of that I'm never going to make enough money, or I'm afraid that I'm never going to be a father, or I'm afraid, whatever the fear is, it starts by getting honest about the fear. And then also I'm resentful at like mom, I'm resentful at dad, I'm resentful at the the priest, or I'm resentful at the teacher, I'm resentful at the bully, I'm resentful at my friend who betrayed me, and my boyfriend that cheated on me, or my girlfriend that cheated, whatever it is. Like it starts with getting honest, usually on paper, about what it is that I'm either angry or bothered by or afraid of. That's the first part. The second part is looking at what has this affected? Okay, so like is it affected my instincts like emotional security, um, my pride, my personality, my ambitions, that kind of stuff, right? So we kind of bring it through this process. But the most important part about the inventory process, and this is the part that a lot of people miss, is when we get through all that, we get into like what my part was. This is the work that a lot of times falls short. So a lot of people talk about what's wrong. A lot of people talk about who they don't like. A lot of people talk about what they're afraid of, but they don't spend enough time on what's my part. It goes back to the can and can't change. Okay, so I talk a lot about this because ultimately the work I do now is around growth, and it's organizational growth, usually revenue, business growth, right? The stuff that like has to happen for companies to not fall behind or become extinct. So I do that work, and it always comes back to like the first step of getting into like any kind of new cycle, or I call it the infinity growth loop, starts with getting honest about the problem. Like there's always a problem that's hampering the growth that we have to get honest about. So that's what I was saying. Like, okay, I'm honest about it. Look, we're afraid of this. We got this problem. Great. Then comes into like, all right, let's inventory of this problem. What can I impact individually? And then what can we impact collectively? Because then we have something to work with. We don't have a solution yet, but we at least know what we're dealing with and what is our role today in that. It's why stuff like, let's say, the Serenity Prayer, right? Most people know that it's, acceptance to on the things I can't change and courage to change the things I can. I find that the wisdom to know the difference, that's that thing I was just telling you about. The way our species is designed, the wisdom comes from you. Like I can get wisdom from you in a way that I can't see because I'm hardwired for denial. We can get into that later on how that affects stagnation and growth. But the fact is that getting honest is always the first step. And it involves another person usually that is there to help draw that out and have a deeper understanding of it. But once I know my part, then I can take all the things I can't change, burn those, and just go to work on what I can change. But we have to continually do this work. This is like every day I've got to continually look at, all right, because what happens is there's so many big, overwhelming things. That's what keeps us in this fear loop, is that there's so many big, overwhelming things that are usually in the future that we don't know and can't control that like is very difficult not to focus on. And so what happens, we just become paralyzed. And so we stay in what I call instead of an infinity growth loop, we stay in a stagnation spiral. So I'm going to pause real quick because I know I just kind of went on a little bit of a ride there.
No, I love that infinity growth loop because it's true. It's like fear keeps us stuck. It keeps us stagnant. It keeps
Yep,
us, playing small.
that's right.
And when we have kind of that growth mentality, which is the concept behind one fear per year is, hey, let's actually build our courage muscle. So
I like that.
actively go search some things out that are going to pull me out of my comfort zone, but it keeps me growing and keeps me learning. And so I absolutely love that. Quick question. So this is a question I ask everybody, no right or wrong answer, but in your mind, if you hear the word fear and you were to give it an exact opposite, like you were to tell me an exact opposite word from fear, what word would you choose?
All right, so the obvious choice is love because that's kind of how I've seen it argued, and I do believe that. The problem is that I feel like fear is better defined than love is for the most part. Ironically, there's a thumbs up. So, um, if I'm not gonna, I don't want to go with love because that's the textbook answer. It's truth, but it's the textbook answer. So the way I interpret love is usefulness to others. So this might be kind of interesting, but for me, when I think about the opposite of fear, I like to think of it like what if I'm acting in fear, what's another action that becomes an anecdote for if fear's the disease, let's say. What's the medicine? And what I have found is that fear is perpetuated by self and isolation, and that getting out of fear or not being in fear and courage is perpetuated by the relationship I have with others and how I'm helping others. So I believe that our one ultimate purpose that's universal as humans is to be of maximum usefulness to others. Like that's truly my belief. I believe that solves a multitude of other issues. Because when I'm doing that, I'm not in my what I call self-centered fear, right? And that's part of what we're dissecting on this whole process is like, what's self-centered fear and what's fear that I is worth doing something about? Right. And the fact is, if I'm just worried about going broke and I'm worried about how it's going to affect me and I'm worried about me, like, and those are all my fears, like, I'm never getting out of that loop. Now, if there's a fear that I'm afraid that my mom's going to die because she's got this illness, or I'm afraid that something's going to happen to my kids, those are not as self centered. There's still going to be some self centered fear inside of that, but sometimes just separating the self centered piece. So I would say, like, the opposite of fear is love. I interpret love as usefulness to others. Like, how am I helping people? Like, that's what love really is. It's not just like this feeling or this thing you want to do or this Hallmark card, but it's like when I think about fear, a lot of times drives us to action or the action of inaction. Okay. It drives us to do something, even if that is to do nothing. That nothing is the something. It drives us. Whereas love, it's a different type of driver. It's not as intense. It's not as aggressive. So it's usually takes second fiddle when you have the option of which one, right? And then we think, well, no, fear's an amazing driver, and if it wasn't for fear, I would have never created all these companies, and that's actually true, right? But when I got to the point where I had to try to figure out how do I make this sustainable, and how do I stop burning out, and how do I make this something that has true value, I had to change. And if I hadn't made that change, I would have been just another statistic with all my businesses like my first business was.
Oh my gosh. You are like just such a breath of fresh air with the usefulness to others and really having that mentality because it's a way of approaching life and it really does define you. And I just think it's like I'm encouraged to work on that part of my life as well. And I know we're running out of time, but one last question is, since this is one fear per year, is there any fear in this next year that you can think of that you might want to walk through, or something maybe last year that you did that was kind of scary? I know you've been at this for a while, so
I've
kind of
walked through a lot of fears. Dadgummit, I probably should have thought of an answer for this. So, yeah, I don't have a great answer for it, and I'm gonna kinda tell you why. I'm at this place in my life where I just don't use fear anymore. I don't use it anymore. It doesn't suit me. I don't have, like, a specific fear that I wanna overcome. I know that fear will be there. I know that it exists. If I was gonna say anything, like, this year in previous years, I had a lot of different types of income, I'll be honest with you, alright? Up until really this 2025 is the first time I'm really, like, my only income is speaking and selling books, okay? And I still have a lot of other things that are cooking and stuff like that, but, like, this is a really special year for me because there is a little bit of fear. It's like, "Oh, well, what happens if you don't, like, finish all of your goals by the end of the year?" Because the one thing about speaking is, like, there's definitely talks that I will do in 2025 that I haven't even met the person yet. That's one thing I know about this business. I've seen it enough cycles where I can pretty much bank on it, but don't ask me what their name is or what the company does or anything like that. But it will happen. And so I have enough faith. So the other thing that's the opposite of fear is faith. And that comes from having action. And so I have faith of what will happen. So I don't live in a lot of fear. But if I had to pick a fear, it would probably be that is that, like, I really want, but again, how do I bring the fear down? My expectations are lower. Like, I have a job to do, and that is to help others grow. That's what I do, right? And I do that by showing them how loving your weird unlocks a new type of growth, And in our next conversation, we can go real deep into that. But at the end of the day, that's what I do. That's my calling. I've done everything else I've done in this world to get to this moment, and I know I will do that. How much revenue comes in or doesn't, that I don't know. But even trying to, like, say that or, like, make these goals and New Year's resolutions and vision boards, I've done so many of those and accomplished so many of those. I'm kind of at this new place where, like, I know what I'm here to do this year, and I have no doubt I'm gonna pull that off because the only thing I'm here to do is be of maximum usefulness to other people, and I'm going to do that. And so, but anyway, if I had a fear, that's it. There you go.
I love that answer. I love that answer. Maximum usefulness to other people. Frankie, you are amazing. Let's go. I am encouraged. I'm crying. I'm ready
Aw.
to, yeah, like let's make this life count and let's
Yes.
really help each other in the process. And um you're just very divinely guided, I would say, or so there's something just very amazing about your spirit, and I know that comes from pain and from
Mhm.
hard experiences in your life that you have chosen to show up every day, to walk through, to improve yourself and help other people, and that's it at the end of the day. Everybody, thank you for joining us and keep walking through your fears.
Thank you so much for having me.